2, 1, 1.5. One and 3/4. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Stanley Gray, and I'm here this evening with a host of individuals, and we're going to talk about our reasons for supporting Joe Biden as opposed to President Trump. A little bit about myself. I was adopted into a military family, an Army family, where we moved around the nation, and then I went to the Naval Academy, and I served as an officer in the Marine Corps until an injury forced me out. I would say that I'm a lifelong Republican, and one of the reasons why I was attracted to the principles and the values, even though I don't necessarily or did not necessarily agree with all of the decisions, but I was very much in agreement with the basis, the character, the integrity. At this time, I'd like to introduce Admiral Hutson.
Thank you very much. My name is John Hutson. I'm a long-time Republican, and I've decided that it was an easy decision to support Joe Biden. Stanley, do you want me to give my little spiel, or do you want to go? Yes,
sir. If you wouldn't mind, sir.
I would be delighted. I have voted for president 13 times, starting with Nixon in '68. But I know two things for sure. One is that this is by far, in all those years, the most important election of my lifetime. And number two, excuse me, is that this is the easiest choice. One candidate is demonstrably and unspeakably unqualified to be president. The other, by personal and professional experience and by temperament, in my opinion, the best qualified candidate to be commander-in-chief since General Eisenhower. I was born when Truman was president, and I can remember Eisenhower. But there's one thing I can't remember. I can't remember when the options were so stark and the country needed a president like Joe Biden so much. In 2016, a lot of potential but ambivalent voters sat it out or voted for a third-party candidate. The result, as we know, was that Trump was elected. We can't let that happen again. Even if you aren't wildly enthusiastic about Biden, either he or Trump is going to be the next president and the commander-in-chief. We all understand duty. I think we have a duty to make and act on that decision. We have to make a choice. It was hard for me to vote for Hillary Clinton 4 years ago, but I spoke at the Democratic Convention. And at that time I said, Donald, you're not fit to shine John McCain's boots. I believed that then, and I'm even more convinced of it now. The Navy motto is honor, courage, and commitment. To those attributes, I'd add the commander-in-chief must personify honesty, humility, empathy, commitment to racial and gender equality, integrity, and of course, basic human intelligence. One candidate models those attributes, the other doesn't. He's sorely lacking. Trump has removed the United States from our long-held position of global leader, weakened our alliances, coddled our foes, and set the stage for global conflict. Nations of the world used to look at the United States through eyes of friendship, appreciation, awe, sometimes envy, sometimes fear, but always with respect. Now they look at us with just wonder, as in, I wonder what the hell happened to the United States. I want to get back to respect. The president must adhere to the Constitution that we're sworn to uphold and defend. What's the point of defending it if the commander-in-chief doesn't uphold it? Voting for Biden doesn't make you a Democrat. It just means you care about the future of the military and the role of the United States in the world. It's time for Trump to go home or to some place where we don't have an extradition treaty, and for Joe Biden to be the commander-in-chief, to protect our troops and return our great nation to its leadership role, to again be that shining city on the hill whose beacon light shines freedom for loving people everywhere. So yes, let's make America great again. Let's elect Joe Biden. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Admiral. In the spirit of true camaraderie, we would like to hear from General and Mrs. Devereaux. And sir, I have to give you a hard time because you're an Air Force Academy grad, and I have a lot of things to say about that, but I won't take our time now.
All right, Stanley, we'll declare a truce tonight. How about that?
Actually, one of my mentees is an Air Force Academy grad. He's at the Army Command and Staff College right now.
Awesome. Well, my name is Major General Rick Devereaux, United States Air Force retired. My wife here, Elizabeth, well, I'll let her introduce herself in a moment. But yeah, I'm from the southeast part of the United States. I grew up in Florida. I went to high school in Atlanta, Georgia. And then my family moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I left for the Air Force Academy. And 38 years after that, I retired and moved back to North Carolina. My wife and I live in Asheville. And, you know, we've had a great journey together. And for the vast majority of that time frame, I was a conservative Republican. Quietly on active duty, of course, like we all are. And I'm kind of a reluctant participant here today, you know, for a couple reasons. One, retired generals and admirals generally don't get involved in politics. We keep our views to ourselves, even in retired life. But this election is different. The second reason I'm a reluctant participant is because, like I said, I was a lifelong conservative, registered Republican. I don't think I ever voted for a Democratic candidate for president. And in 2012, when we moved to North Carolina, when I retired, we actually did a little work for the Mitt Romney campaign. And a few years later, we're eagerly participating in the Republican primaries in 2016, voted for Marco Rubio, and started to become a little bit distressed of the tone that we were hearing from one of the candidates, Donald Trump. A tone that didn't sound Republican to me, didn't sound unifying, didn't sound respectful, didn't sound like a leader. But we sort of grinned and bore it for a while after the election. And but then we saw even more divisiveness, falsehoods, personal attacks, bullying, standing not with our allies, but cozying up to Putin and other dictators. I felt like our president was more interested in entertaining us than seriously tackling the job of presidency. And yes, I heard from my friends, Rick, they would say, my conservative friends, who I counted myself still as one, Rick, you just got it. Don't worry about the man, his character, his behavior. Just look at the results he's getting. He got a tax bill through. He's for deregulation. He's for appointing some good Supreme Court justices. And you know, what my response was, when I served in the military and we looked at our commanders and leaders, we never held that as a standard. What results our commander got or what decisions they made. We judged our commanders on their conduct, their integrity, their character, how they unified our organizations, how they made us feel part of a team. And that's the least we should expect in a commander-in-chief. So for me, what brought me here tonight is less about politics. It's not about party. It's not about partisan sort of notions or even conservative values, because frankly, like Stanley, things like character, fiscal responsibility, free trade, valuing our allies, valuing our immigrant populations, all those things that we used to say were conservative values, I'm not sure that they've found a home in the party of Trump. So I'm here tonight, not just to reject President Trump, but just to say we have a great leader in Joe Biden, someone who's decent, a man of character, somebody who's a moderate, someone who works across the aisle, someone who stands with our allies, and someone who will make America feel good about itself again and really fight for the soul of America. So I'm honored to be part of the conversation. Elizabeth?
Hello, I'm Elizabeth Devereaux, and I'm honored to be with these distinguished gentlemen tonight with their distinguished careers of service. And I appreciate all that all of you guys have done. I'm speaking tonight as a spouse of an Air Force veteran. I'm not a veteran myself, but I was a spouse of a veteran and a mom to Air Force brat children, even though they weren't brats. We moved about 20 times, and the moves were always hardest on our children, of course. So they were my primary concern every time we moved, to get them adjusted. And I can say that everywhere the Air Force sent us, we loved it. We found something good everywhere we went. We met wonderful people. We got to know amazing families. We experienced parts of the country and even a little bit overseas that we never would have seen otherwise. So for my time being an Air Force spouse, it was a wonderful time of my life. I was very involved in spouse issues and family support issues in the Air Force. And the longer Rick stayed in, the more I got to get to know the leaders of our Air Force and their spouses and and I got to see them up close with all the wonderful things they do to support the families. And so I'm speaking tonight for the families and for people like me. I was always a Republican. I never politicked for anybody. Did a little bit of work for Romney when we got out because it was allowed then. But I felt that I was conservative fiscally and socially. And so to me, the Republican Party was my party until they nominated Donald Trump. And I couldn't believe that that happened. So I couldn't vote for him. And I didn't. So for the first time in 2016, I voted Democrat. And so I'm here to say, if you're like me and you've always been a Republican, you might find it really hard to check the D block, but it's okay. The first time is the hardest, but then it'll just get easier. And as I've seen how this has gone the last 4 years, I know that we can't take 4 more years. And I know that the Democrats have nominated a good and honorable man who understands military families. And I know he has empathy for all of us, whether we're Democrats or Republicans. And so I'm here to encourage anybody that's like me, that considers yourself conservative and that you think it would be hard to cross over and be a Democrat, to don't consider the party. Just think about, you want to vote for the content, the character of the man. And if you do that, I think you'll pick Joe Biden.
Thank you, ma'am. General Schenk, could you please share something about yourself, sir? Could you unmute?
There we go. All right. Hi, I'm Don Schenk. I'm a 33-year Army veteran. I'm originally from the great state of Maryland. Spent a lot of time when I was on active duty traveling through the Southeast. You can't be in the Army without traveling through the Southeast to places like Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, even Louisiana. I spent 33 years on active duty. I spent all of my time either in operational tank units from platoon up through division, or the second half of my career roughly in defense acquisition. So I've got a good finger on the pulse of what makes the Army run from a force generation side and what makes the Army run from a combat operations side. After I retired in 2004, I went into private business and then ultimately settled up with a major defense contractor, and I worked for them throughout the United States and the Middle East and North Africa. So I've had a wide opportunity to see a lot of the world. And throughout my travels, I've noticed the almost awe and reverence with which our country has been treated by our allies and even by those who might not be our allies. They had great respect for our country. I'm here now because as a lifelong Republican growing up, I can remember when I was in college that I actually supported the primary campaign of a guy named Rockefeller, and went on to support other Republicans until I went on active duty when I had to do it less visibly. But in 2016, I got faced with a great conundrum. And that was the first of 4 opportunities I took to not vote for Donald Trump and to walk away from my Republican Party. That was not an easy decision to do. But in 2016, I saw deep flaws in the character of the man that the party was thinking about nominating. And I pulled the blue lever for the first time in a primary, and I voted against Donald Trump, and I voted for John Kasich, because I thought John Kasich had the right stuff to lead the Republican Party. But as the nomination ultimately went to Donald Trump, I could not vote Republican again. So at that point, I had to make a choice, and the choice was between 2 bad alternatives, and I think I chose the least worst alternative, and I think the record has proven that out. In the 2020 primary election, I had the opportunity to help shape the Democratic response to Donald Trump, because there was no way that I was going to help that man become president again. And at that point, I decided to throw in my lot with Joe Biden. I saw a man of character, I saw a man of competence, and I saw a man of commitment, a man of deep passion who felt so strongly for this country that he stepped away from personal tragedy to come back into the world of national politics at great burden to himself. And it's not an easy thing to do, to take this on, and he took it on for the good of the nation. Last month, I had the opportunity to cast my vote and deliver my ballot for Joe Biden for president. I saw this as a vote for America, for all of America. I saw it as a vote for the future, and I saw it as a vote for my children and my grandchildren. I saw it as a vote for the sensibility in a community in which I live, and for sensibilities in communities all around the globe. Every place that we in the military served and still expect us, and our nation still expects us to serve on demand. I saw it as a vote for good and positive forward momentum, not a vote for some fictional idea of a country that no longer exists and for which we should not return. I saw it as a vote for justice, as opposed to a simple vote for law and order, but instead justice for all people. I saw it as a vote for governance, where people can actually talk with one another rather than at one another, and where things actually get done. And as I was preparing for tonight, one of the things that struck me was, a long time ago, our party used to talk about being compassionate conservatives. I don't see that anymore. And I asked myself, what happened? What happened to me? And I realized that absolutely nothing happened to me. I'm still the same person I always was, but our party got hijacked. Our party got kidnapped, much like the governor in the state of Virginia and the governor of the state of Michigan were going to get kidnapped earlier this month. But that's what happened to our party. I didn't move, the party moved. And I would suggest to all Republicans that are on the line listening and thinking about what they want to do next week, that they understand and appreciate what happened to their party, and make a vote for the country as opposed to the party, and vote for a man who can be the president for all Americans. Thank you very much, Stan.
Thank you, General. Admiral Abbot, could you please help us with what you feel?
Stanley, thank you very much. I'm grateful to be with you and with these other wonderful folks and talk about my own journey. There's a lot of similarities with theirs. I do have roots in the Southeast. I was born in Pensacola and I went to Navy flight training there. Like all of you, I got sent along the way to a lot of other places in the next 30 plus years, including being stationed in Florida again. But, you know, I was an absentee voter, and I voted for folks on both sides of the aisle, actually. I was an independent. That's one way you can register in Florida. And I made judgments about how I felt about the particular individuals who were being offered up on what I thought they would give the country. In the run-up to the 2016 election, I can't remember exactly when it was. I think it may actually have been in 2015. Donald Trump made a comment about John McCain, said that he was not a hero because he was captured and a prisoner of war. I'm a naval aviator. I lost a lot of friends in the Vietnam War. I remember the day that John McCain was shot down. And I was in the Tonkin Gulf flying from Enterprise on the day that he was released. He refused early release. And for me, John McCain's a hero. So are all of those other shipmates and wingmen that I was with in the Vietnam War. So I knew that I was not going to be able to vote for Donald Trump in 2016. But after the election, I was ready to observe what went on and make my judgment about how the administration would conduct itself. And I began to watch what I considered to be a sort of serial record of missteps in foreign policy and national security, things that I thought were just mistakes. I did not support and believe it's a mistake for us to have withdrawn from the Iran nuclear deal. I'm dismayed by the deterioration of our relationships with friends and especially allies, especially the NATO alliance. I was particularly unhappy by what I thought were mismanaged efforts with both China and North Korea. I think our relationship with China at the particular time is as bad as it's been in 3 decades. And, you know, the love fest with Kim Jong-un, I thought was abhorrent. And the world's a dangerous place as a result of what we did. Maybe the most unhappy I was the relationship that the president seemed to establish with Vladimir Putin. And it manifested itself in quite a few different ways, you know, saying he believed Putin and not his own intelligence community about what they were saying about the Russian interference in the 2016 election. But then recently, you know, Putin is sending money so the Taliban can kill American soldiers, and this country didn't say anything about it. And I thought to myself, this is not right. Actually, the missteps have continued right up until this week, when I heard the president make a remark about the conflict that is occurring between Ethiopia, Sudan, and Egypt. And it sounded to me like the president was urging military action to solve that confrontation. It's about a dam being built in Ethiopia, if you haven't followed it. But so those were my milestones along the way to feeling that the administration just wasn't on my shoot of music. But we got to 2020 and the COVID crisis occurred. And I watched what I thought was mismanagement at essentially every step of the way in dealing with the COVID crisis. Now, I didn't mention that after I retired, I was asked to come to the White House to work in the summer of 2001 on a project for Vice President Cheney and President Bush. And I was actually there on 9/11. So I got asked to stay and to help Governor Tom Ridge get started with the Homeland Security Council. We spent the next 2 years working on a plan for Department of Homeland Security. And I was able to watch Bush 43 and that administration deal with a serious national crisis, one that clearly was threatening to the country and which alarmed the country and which scared the country and needed leadership at the top and needed effective action by the national bureaucracy. And when it came to COVID-19, I didn't see any of those things. I saw what I would describe as a failure of management 101 by the administration. We don't have time to go into it, but I mean, it was sort of every single thing that went on, almost without exception, was poorly managed. But the thing that was worst for me was the president failed leadership 101. In a national crisis, I remember George Bush standing on the pile of rubble of the Twin Towers with a bullhorn in his hand, talking to the crowd, but he was also talking to the American public. And he was saying, this is tough, but we're going to get through this together. I didn't hear any leadership by example from President Bush. In fact, it seemed to be, ironically, a series of steps that divided the nation, that misled the nation about what was occurring. And so it was easy for me to make the decision along about Easter when he said, this COVID thing's going to be gone by about Easter. And I said, no, sirree, I need to help Joe Biden get elected. Joe Biden, I know, is a man that brings people together. And he can help heal the divisions that this president has caused us to experience in this nation. I've watched Joe Biden do that. I know he can do it again. And I have already sent my ballot in, mailed it in early on. I hope everybody else on this call is going to vote early. And Joe Biden needs to be our next president.
Well, thank you, Admiral. Listening to everybody, it really is kind of calming to me because often I feel myself that I'm like a lone man on an island here in Tampa, Florida, because many of the people that I interact with, they don't seem to care about character and integrity in the House. I hope I'm not going to make anyone uncomfortable with this, but if I am, I'm going to apologize. One of the things about the Republican Party that I grew up in with, it was a faith-based party. And I'd like to know, Ms. Devereaux, because I am a Marine and I'm a gentleman, so therefore I will ask the female amongst us the first question. Has your faith had anything to do with your position on who you're going to vote for in this election?
Well, Stanley, that's a great question. I like to think that my faith motivates me to do everything that I do because it's an integral part of my life. I will say, as far as faith is related in this election, that I was raised a Southern Baptist, and so I understand evangelical Christians. I understand when people say that this election is about getting the rights of the unborn restored and things like that. I understand those feelings. And I've had those feelings too. I used to be a single issue voter along abortion lines. But now that I am farther down the road in life, and I see it's a much more complicated issue than that. Oh, by the way, I'm still a Christian, but I'm not a Southern Baptist. I've moved over to being a Methodist. But now that I'm a little farther down the road of life, I see that protecting the rights of the unborn is important, but it's also to protect the lives of the people that are born. It's to look out for the people that need our help, the underprivileged of our society, to help the homeless in every community, to help the people, the children that are in cages on the border. You know, that's life too, and that is important too. And so, yeah, faith issues are important, but for someone to say that one side is more faithful or Christian than the other side, I think is a false argument. You know, I just think that we need to look at the bigger picture, which is sometimes really complicated.
Yes, ma'am. Does anybody else have anything to say with respect to your faith and your decisions?
When I was stationed in Washington, the 3 or 4 times I was there, I guess we used to go to St. John's Episcopal Church, my wife and I. And watching President Trump stand in front of that church using the Bible as a prop was appalling to me. That was, to me, as unchristian as anybody could possibly be. And so that I think that and I agree with everything that Elizabeth said, except I wasn't a Southern Baptist starting out, but the attributes, the things that people of faith, Christian or otherwise, the things that people of faith care about in their faith, I think is a complete anathema to Donald J. Trump. He doesn't have a clue. He can't relate to that, and he certainly has no interest, so far as I can tell, in following it. You know, as Elizabeth said, taking 545 babies away from their parents and losing the connection. I mean, you just can't abide that. It's beyond the pale.
Yes, General.
Yeah, so the other thing that I would add to this discussion about faith is we should never forget that one of the very first proclamations Donald J. Trump made was that he was going to impose a ban on Muslims, one of the 3 monotheistic religions. So he's already imposed a ban on Muslims even before he became the commander-in-chief. And I really have a hard time even putting those words in the same sentence. We understand, and Elizabeth and John really did a very, very good explanation about where they are on this. As probably the only Jewish American in this panel, I will tell you that his actions have been very, very divisive. They've been very, very hurtful in the Jewish community in the United States, not because of anything directly said, but because of the dog whistles that he has blown and the way he has stirred people up. The rise of anti-Semitism in this country over the course of the last 4 years unfortunately an amazing thing to see. And it is very, very bad for the country. So now we've got an individual who is pitting person against person based on their faith, when in fact, the role of the president, as we all know, the role of the president is to be a unifying force. I'm reminded of, the efforts that Franklin Roosevelt took at the beginning of America's involvement in the Second World War. Everything he did was full disclosure. I'm going to tell you everything I can. I'm going to tell you what we're doing, and it's going to be a hard, hard fight. And he was fully open about that. Compare that, as we said previously, with the response by Donald Trump to the coronavirus, and everything is very, very closed. And the failure to tell the truth to the American people is something that none of us would ever tolerate in our subordinates or our superiors when we were in the military on active duty.
Thank you, General. I'd like to just pitch this question to no one specifically, but just to everybody. What does the term "for the good of the order" mean for you with respect to your selection for the President of the United States in 2020?
Boy, I tell you, that's a great question, Stanley. It could go down a whole lot of different paths for me. One of the things that comes into my mind when you say that, for the good of the order, I think about the fact that all of us served for a long time on active duty, and we know how important it is for this country to have an apolitical military, one that is subordinate to civilian control. It's been that way since the founding of the Republic. So different from so many other countries. It's really an absolute foundation of our democracy. I've watched Donald Trump actually work to weaken that foundational element. And I can give you quite a few examples, but one of them was already mentioned, which was parading across Lafayette Square with protesters being put back by tear gas so that he could have a photo op with General Milley alongside, which General Milley later apologized for. And then, not too long after that, he said, the troops really love me, but those brass in the Pentagon don't. All they care about is making money for the defense industry. Well, to me, that was an assault on the apolitical military. That was an assault on civilian military relationships. It weakens our democracy to have the military used as a political tool. And if we had time, I could give you a list of other items that I would bring to bear on this argument, including his actions in connection with the relief of Captain Crozier on the USS Theodore Roosevelt, his interference with that, and also his insertion into the senior chief SEAL who was convicted at court-martial and then restored to rank by the president. Those are not actions which support our military. They create a divide between the civilian leadership and our professional military.
If I may add to that for just one moment, I agree with Abbot. Because I'm a two-star and he's a four-star, so I obviously agree with everything that Abbot said, but I really do. But I also want to add to that it's not just DOD. Trump has done the same thing to Justice, to the State Department, to HHS, to basically all of the organizations within the government. He can't deal with being in charge of an organization. He has to be a solo practitioner, just running his own deal to his own self-aggrandizement. And we see that time and time again. The difference is that the military, DOD, for the most part, has stood up to him. And other, the Secretary of State, the Attorney General haven't stood up to him. But we military, veterans, and active duty are all part of the population. And when the post office goes to hell, we suffer. I get my prescriptions through Express Scripts. And if they don't come because the post office has been decimated, that's a problem for America, but it's also a problem for veterans, particularly if we're deployed. Thank you.
No, Stanley, I just want to add too, when we talk about the good of the order, all four of us have been commanders. Some of us several times over. I commanded 5 times in the Air Force. And I think we'd all agree that the first responsibility of any commander is to take care of their troops and take care of their families, to protect them. And as Admiral Abbot mentioned, our commander-in-chief has failed in that basic responsibility during this pandemic. And you think about it, yeah, we could critique each of those mismanagements, those management missteps and leadership failures, but I boil it down very simply. A leader in a crisis has a responsibility, one, to accept responsibility. And how many times have we heard our president say, I don't accept responsibility? That would be an anathema to any commander, any leader at any level to utter those words. The second basic tenet is to be truthful, speak with integrity, speak to the American people and share the facts. We can take it. And yet we have a commander-in-chief who is telling us we've turned the corner, or failed to tell us in the early days that this was a lethal virus. And finally, any leader in a situation like this, we expect them to take charge, step up. And yet we had a President Trump who, after several days in a row, standing up in front of the cameras during the coronavirus task force daily briefings, as soon as he began to get criticized, what did he do? He canceled the briefings. Where did the task force go? We don't know. Who was put in charge? The governors? With what guidance? We don't know. I mean, it's instead of talking about how the United States of America is leading the way in this pandemic, we find ourselves making excuses about why we're just doing pretty well. And any commander, any leader in the military, certainly we would expect more of our commander-in-chief to lead us through a crisis like this.
Yeah, so
General, I don't want to add any levity to what you're saying, but I disagree with a part of what you shared with us. The virus has turned the corner, but the corner is now pointed up.
Yeah.
One of the things that the president did just recently, he signed an executive order that ended diversity-like training. When I look at General Devereaux, because we grew up in the same era, General Schenk, I mean, I can remember diversity being a real issue that needed to be, one, acknowledged and attacked, because it was actually taking away from the effectiveness of our forces. How do you feel about this, what Trump just did? Excuse me, President Trump just did.
Yeah, so I'll lead that one off, because this is giving me a lot of concern. I think all of us on the panel are one-time attendees and graduates of the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute. That was required training for us. But more fundamental than that, it has been required in the military to understand and appreciate the full nature of every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine that works for us, and appreciate them for their value as individuals and the sanctity of human life and their own individual contributions to the service as a result of their upbringing are the things that make us better, not worse. They make us better because we're stronger when we're all woven together in tight-knit teams. We have to celebrate that diversity and put it to our best use for the good of the organization. And, you know, we've all done that. We all recognize and appreciate how important it is to continue that work. There have been failings across the primary and secondary school systems in this country that leave it up to the military now when young men and women come on active duty to help them understand the true value of human life. And that's what we did when we were in the Army or the Navy or the Air Force, or in your case, the Marine Corps. We always talked about the value of human life and how important it was and how we were better because of our differences, not worse because of our differences, but much, much better. And to now suddenly say, we're going to stop doing that training, I think is absolutely going the wrong direction. And for a man to say, I'm not racist, but I don't want you to do any racial awareness training is just crazy. It's absolutely crazy. Talk about something that's not for the benefit of the order, not in the best interest of the good of the order. There you have it right there, because it will divide us, and it will just really, really throw a monkey wrench into all we've tried to do since the late 1940s, when President Truman forced the integration of the military, but we've been better for it. So we should never celebrate something like that, because it's just bad news for us, and it's bad news for the country long term, because the people that are on active duty today go on to become productive citizens when they leave the military, and they take those skills and those understandings with them, and they become better Americans for having done that.
You know, a lot of times when you have a job or when you're interviewing for a job, or you come up with this list of competencies and transferable skill sets. What are some of the competencies and skill sets that you would be highly desirous of a candidate for the President of the United States?
Can I take a whack at that, Stanley? It little bit follows on to what Don was talking about. I remember how divided the country was in the 1960s. I realize I have a little longer perspective than some of you, but the country was truly divided at that time over the Vietnam conflict. We needed to be able to be brought together. Now, we're in a very different era, but this country is right now divided over issues of race, over the question of systemic racism. We need an individual who can help us navigate this country through that challenge. It's a complex one. It's not one that gets solved by an executive order, changing sensitivity training, or even increasing it. It needs a lot more than that. It needs bringing people together who can talk about the issues. And I just know from having watched Vice President Biden operate for a lot of years that that's exactly the kind of person he is. He's a person who can talk to others with opposing views. He will bring people to a table, and he may even appoint commissions to look at some of these issues. That's what the country needs to do. So I know that Joe Biden is the person that's going to do that properly, not Donald Trump.
May I
Let me add to that. Go ahead.
May I add that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I wanted to add a decent person, and I wanted to add empathy to that list. that I think those are qualities that we look for in a president. I remember when our oldest two children were preschoolers, President Reagan was president for 8 years. And every time they saw that man on the television, they knew he was the president. And they respected that, even as little children, because he was a gentleman. He spoke kindly when he was speaking. He looked nice. He was just a good image for them as little children. We have little granddaughters now that look at the television and they run away, you know, when they see Donald Trump. That's not something you can say to your children. Someday you can be like him. You can be president like him. We don't want that. And as far as empathy, I know that Joe Biden has it because of the life that he's led and the loss that he's had in his life. And it reminds me of a story, my story with President George Bush. Came to Travis Air Force Base right after 9/11. And he came to visit the troops and he gave a great speech and then he was going off to China. And Rick and I were standing in a line hoping to get to shake his hand. There was thousands of people out there and he walked right past us. And Rick said, "Thank you for your leadership." And then I shook his hand and I said, "President Bush, we're praying for you." And he stopped. He turned around and looked at me and he said, "I can feel your prayers. And I know that people all across the United States are praying for me. And I need that right now. And I appreciate it. And keep it up." And he didn't have to say that. He was going, he was moving, but he wanted to, he felt it. And I felt it too. We had a moment, you know, and he had empathy for me. And that's what we need in a leader. And I know Joe Biden would be that kind of a leader, even though he's not a Republican. He's a Democrat, but I don't think that matters anymore. I think we need to vote for a decent person and somebody that has empathy for all Americans, whether they're Democrats or Republicans.
Admiral Hutson.
When I was working in Navy Legislative Affairs years ago, I had a meeting scheduled with Senator Biden. He was late, and his staff, not as an excuse, but just sort of as an explanation, said that he was coming from the airport and they could never get him through an airport because the shoeshine guys and the guys pushing mops and other travelers would call out, "Hey, Joe," and he'd go over and talk with them. And they couldn't get him out of the airport. He asked about the families, and they'd have conversations. And I think that's typical of him. That's just the way he is. And I can't imagine President Trump doing that. Of course, he doesn't travel in an airport anymore, but even before he was president, without cameras rolling or some money on the line or something. But Joe Biden has the empathy that Elizabeth was talking about, and I think that's absolutely critical. The other thing is, and I'll read this. He was, because I thought it was important. When he was looking for a running mate, looking for Harris, he said, this is a quote. He said, "I'm looking for someone who has strengths that I don't have so much. I'm not afraid to go out and find someone who knows more than I know about a subject." That's Joe Biden. That ain't Donald Trump.
Yeah, so I'm reminded of what the president said when he was surprised and became president. He said, "I'm going to surround myself with the best people." Look where we are. He surrounded himself now, after going through quite a number of them, with a bunch of sycophants who will only say what he wants to hear and are afraid to say anything else, because they have learned that the way to survive is to support the guy who is the transactor in chief. Everything for Donald Trump is a transaction. Nothing about Donald Trump is a relationship. And when I'm looking for qualities in a leader, I want somebody who's going to expand our relationships domestically, expand our relationships with the Congress, work across the aisle. I think Joe Biden has demonstrated that through his time in the Senate and as vice president. And we'll also build those relationships that we need internationally in order to restore America's prominence. But I think it's also important for all of us to remember that it's not just the person at the top of the ticket we need to be thinking about. We need to be thinking about those down ticket races and how they're going to affect everything that happens when Joe Biden becomes president. He needs a strong legislature that he can work with. And at the state and local level, we need strong governments there as well. So I would encourage everybody to not just think about only at the top of the ticket, but go throughout the entire ballot, because this is truly an election that is going to shape the course of all we're going to do for a very, very long time. And I can't speak about that more strongly.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for your contributions this evening. They've been very feeling and very revealing of how and what you are as individuals. I'd like to close with some sharings, all of which are very biased, and I'm going to tell you they are. I'm obviously a very pro-military person. Within my family, we have 6 Purple Hearts. I've had the opportunity to meet Senator McCain. I've seen him limp. I've seen his arm that's shorter than the other one. I also had the opportunity as the officer rep when I was at the Naval Academy to have our officer rep then was Commander Fellows, who retired as a captain. I can remember when Commander Fellows told us about what a real friend will do. And where this may sound gory, when he said it, it took the wind out of my sails. We were kidding around one day after football practice and hitting each other with towels. And someone said, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, he's my friend." Commander Fellows said, "A friend will stick his finger up your anus when you're impacted," and walked away. As a 19-year-old kid, I said, that is serious. When I hear the president defame the military, I'm disgusted. I take this very personal. I can actually remember when I was in the ceremonial unit in Washington, D.C., standing on the tarmac when we had people who were killed in South America. And I watched the president and the vice president, President Bush was the vice president, and President Reagan. I could see the hurt and the pain in their faces when they talked to the families. And just to show the sincerity of President Bush, about 15 years ago, I was in New Orleans, and I could see the president was there, and I could see all these Secret Servicemen around him. So I get out of the way. A few minutes later, a Secret Serviceman comes over to me and says, "The president would like to speak to you." So I go over to the president at a very famous hotel, and he says, "I know you from someplace. Where is it?" And I told him, "Sir, when I was stationed at 8th and I gave him all the things that I did." Well, these are personal stories for me, but these are things that I expect in leaders of our country. And unfortunately, we don't have that right now. I will end this to everybody on the panel and to everybody listening. Go vote. Thank you for your attention this evening.
Thanks, Stanley.
Thank you very much, Stanley. Appreciate it. Thank you, Admiral Abbot, General Devereaux, and Admiral Hutson. Appreciate it. Great evening.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for attending our webinar this evening. My name is Carrie Lee, and I'm serving as the Director of Southeast Expansion for Veterans and Military Families for Biden. Our organization, along with our partners in Georgia and North Carolina and Florida, put this on this evening, and I want to give a big shout out and a thank you to everybody who was involved, especially Margaret Mullins, who helped to put this on. I'm a military family member as well. I'm an Air Force brat, actually, and very proud of it, proud of the service. I want to give a huge thanks to our esteemed and accomplished panelists, and especially to Mr. Stanley Gray for serving as our moderator this evening. And I want to give a thanks to everybody who was here tonight. We have only 7 days to get this right. Election day is a deadline. People are voting now. Over 60 million people have already cast their ballots, but there is so much work still to be done. and we need your help to get voters to the polls. Veterans in particular, we understand service. Military family members understand service, and we have a special connection with the American people. And that makes you particularly persuasive when you're getting people out to the polls. And it makes you particularly important to encouraging people to vote and to get their ballots in the mail. We have several opportunities to volunteer if you're interested this week. We have multiple phone banks running. If you live in Georgia or want to make calls into Georgia, please volunteer on Wednesday, tomorrow, from 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern time, or on Thursday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern time. If you want to make calls into Florida, a hot battleground state, the entire South is contested this time. Then they have a phone bank tomorrow night from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern time, as well as every Saturday. Next Saturday, our last phone bank from noon to 3. And then make phone calls into Georgia. We have a special veteran to veteran phone bank in North Carolina that runs from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. Please consider volunteering and making calls. I want to give another huge thanks to our panelists, Admiral Abbot, Major General and Mrs. Devereaux, Admiral Hutson, General Schenk, and Mr. Gray. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for speaking. Thank you so much for your service. We really appreciate it. And I hope everyone has a great night.
Good night, all.
Thank you.
God bless.
Good night, all.
Go vote.
Thank you, Carrie.